In a recent interview, the host leans in with a mischievous smile and asks Meryl Streep if at 76 she still remembers the ones who made her pulse quicken. Meryl doesn't flinch. She tilts her head, eyes glittering, and laughs, the kind of laugh that makes the audience shift forward. Then she says it. There are 7 actors she would have broken every rule for. Not just crushes, temptations, faces and voices that could undo her completely. The host eggs her on, and Meryl leans closer to the mic, unbothered, unapologetic. One by one, she promises to name them, savoring the tension. And with a sly smile, Meryl Streep begins. "It's different when you're my age," she says, adjusting her elegant sleeve. "There's a freedom that comes with the years. I've built a life I'm proud of. I've earned the luxury of honesty." The audience exhales a collective breath they didn't realize they were holding. This is Meryl Streep, 3-time Oscar winner, 21-time nominee, the grande dame of American cinema, speaking with the frankness typically reserved for closed doors and memoirs published posthumously. "But let's be clear about the rules here," she continues, her voice gaining that precise, melodic cadence that has commanded screens for 5 decades. "This isn't tabloid fodder. This is about magnetism, talent, the chemical impossibility of being in a room with someone and remaining unchanged." She pauses. "I'll name them, but with reverence first. Always respect. Never crude details." 1. Robert Redford, The Golden Compass. We're on the set of Out of Africa in 1985. The Kenyan sun cuts across the savannah, painting everything in amber and dust. Between takes, Redford stands at the edge of the camp, script in hand, seemingly unaware of his effect on the world around him. I watch his hands, weathered but precise, turning pages with a thoughtfulness that never feels rehearsed. His preparation is monastic. He arrives knowing not just his lines, but the emotional topography of every scene. His questions during rehearsal are spare, pointed, revealing a mind that's always 3 steps ahead but patient enough to bring everyone along. When he disagrees with a direction, it's never ego. It's because he's protecting something true about the character that others haven't yet seen. But then the cameras roll, and something else emerges, something beyond craft. His eyes hold mine with such conviction that the script dissolves. The way he stands in Sidney Pollack's carefully constructed frames, it's as if the light bends around him, not the other way around. His voice carries the perfect measure of restraint and wilderness. In one scene, his hand brushes mine as he passes a cup, and the contact is so deliberate, so charged with unspoken intention that I nearly forget the next 3 lines. We maintained a professional boundary that frankly made the work better. That tension you see on screen is real and carefully preserved. I sometimes think that Robert doesn't actually age. He simply becomes more essentially himself with each passing year, like a photograph developing in slow motion. 2. Daniel Day-Lewis, The Method Storm. The first table read, "For The Iron Lady" in 2011. Daniel isn't even in my scenes. He's researching another role entirely and just visiting the production. He sits silently at the far end of the table, a notebook open before him, pen moving in those precise architectural lines of his. His presence changes the temperature of the room. His dedication borders on the supernatural. 3 hours into rehearsal, I watch him listening, truly listening, to a production assistant describing how her grandmother lived through the era we're depicting. He asks questions that reveal he's already read 6 books on the period. His immersion is complete, almost frightening in its totality. The work is never separate from the man. They breathe as one. During lunch, we find ourselves alone in the commissary. His eyes, those impossibly focused instruments, find mine across the table. He speaks about character motivation with such intensity that it becomes intimate without trying to be. His hands gesture with controlled passion, fingertips occasionally pressing into the tablecloth to emphasize a point. His voice drops an octave when he disagrees with my interpretation of a scene, not confrontational, but conspiratorial, as if we're the only 2 people who understand what's really at stake in storytelling. We kept to craft and character, but there was a current underneath, The recognition between two people who disappear so completely into other lives that coming back to themselves is sometimes the hardest role of all. I once told a director that working across from Daniel is like trying to act while standing in front of a gathering storm, terrifying, electric, and impossible to look away from. 3. Al Pacino, The Volcanic Gentleman, the 1997 Golden Globes after-party. The room swirls with industry chatter and champagne glasses catching light. Al stands by the window, slightly apart from the crowd. As I approach, he turns and his face transforms with that smile, the one that starts in his eyes before his mouth catches up. On stage, his precision is legendary. That voice, that instrument, can shift from a whisper to a roar in the space of a semicolon. He finds the music in language that others miss completely. I once watched him perform Mammoth from the wings, and the way he handled the playwright's staccato rhythms was like watching a virtuoso find melodies no one else could hear. His commitment to the moment is absolute, but it's in the stillness between his explosions that Al is most dangerous. At the party, he takes my elbow to guide me through the crowd, and the gentle pressure of his fingers carries more intent than most actors' monologues. When he leans in to speak over the music, his breath warm against my ear, the words themselves barely register. It's the intimacy of the gesture, the way his hand hovers at the small of my back without quite touching. He laughs at something I say, and the sound vibrates in his chest before it reaches the air. His eyes, dark, impossibly alive, hold mine with a focus that makes everyone else in the room disappear. We've never worked together beyond a brief scene at a charity event, which is perhaps for the best. Some chemistries are too volatile to sustain a full production. Al doesn't perform charm, he simply is charm. Earthy, unfiltered, with a gravity that pulls you into orbit whether you plan to go there or not. 4. Denzel Washington, The Controlled Burn, Oscar Rehearsals, 2009. We're both presenting, and there's a technical issue with the teleprompter that leaves us waiting in the wings for 20 minutes. Denzel stands with perfect posture, script in hand, occasionally marking a breath or emphasis with his pen. The stage managers flutter around us, but he remains undisturbed, a center of calm in the chaos. His craft is mathematical in its precision, every gesture economical, every inflection carrying exactly the weight it needs, never more, never less. I've studied his performances the way music students study Bach, for the structure, the discipline, the invisible architecture that makes it all seem effortless. In rehearsal, he runs his lines 3 different ways, testing the acoustics of the space, adjusting his projection accordingly. Not because he needs to, because excellence is simply his baseline, but when the conversation turns personal during our wait, something shifts. His focus, when turned directly on you, is a physical force. He asks about my children with genuine interest, laughing at my stories with that smile that transforms his entire face. When he disagrees with something I say about a mutual director, he steps half an inch closer, voice dropping to a register that wouldn't carry beyond us even in an empty theater. The deliberate way he chooses his words, pausing, considering, then delivering them with perfect timing, makes even casual conversation feel like the most important scene you'll ever play. We've maintained a warm professional friendship over decades, but there's always been an unacknowledged current beneath our interactions, carefully channeled into mutual respect. Denzel carries himself like a man who has nothing to prove and everything to give, and there are few things more magnetic than that kind of certainty. 5. Jeremy Irons, The Velvet Knife. A small dinner party in London, 1988, after we'd both been working in the West End. Just 12 people in a Georgian townhouse, candlelight catching the edges of silver and crystal. Jeremy sits across from me, long fingers wrapped around a wine glass, voice carrying softly above the conversation without seeming to try. His technical mastery borders on the supernatural, the way he can deliver the most complex emotional material while appearing utterly at ease. It's like watching a chess grandmaster who sees the entire board while everyone else is still learning the rules. During dinner, he recites a passage from Shakespeare that someone has challenged him to remember, and the language flows through him as naturally as breath, each word placed with lapidary precision. But it's the casual intimacy he creates that disarms completely. The way he leans slightly forward when I speak, as if my words have a gravitational pull. His laugh, that low-textured sound that seems to start somewhere below his sternum. When he disagrees with my take on a director we both know, he does so with such elegant linguistic footwork that I find myself almost agreeing with him before I realize what's happened. After dinner, in the narrow hallway leading to the sitting room, he places his hand briefly on my shoulder to let me pass first. The contact lasts less than a second, but his fingers press with just enough intention to suggest volumes of unwritten possibility. Our paths have crossed many times professionally, always with immaculate boundaries that somehow made the unspoken tension more potent rather than less. Jeremy doesn't seduce with effort. He simply exists in a way that makes you acutely aware of the thin membrane between propriety and its delicious opposite. We've reached the midpoint of Meryl's confession, and the studio audience is completely still, caught in the spell of her unvarnished honesty. The host opens his mouth to ask a question, but Meryl raises one elegant hand, stopping him mid-gesture. "You know," she says, her voice softening, "there's something about the roads not taken that makes them shine brighter in memory. The unrealized possibilities, the scenes we never got to play." She glances down, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. Sometimes I think restraint, professional ethical restraint, is its own kind of intimacy. The acknowledgement of something powerful enough that it needs to be contained. She looks back up, eyes clear and direct. In film, we call it subtext, everything unsaid that charges what is said, the script beneath the script. Her laugh is soft but genuine. Maybe that's why these memories remain so vivid. They're perfect because they remained unfilmed, existing only in possibility. The audience absorbs this like a collective breath. Then Meryl straightens slightly and continues. 6. Ralph Fiennes, The Silent Danger. Budapest, 2014. A small wood-paneled bar after a day of interviews for different projects. We find ourselves at the same hotel, and the chance meeting turns into a nightcap. Just the two of us at a corner table, the room nearly empty except for a pianist playing something melancholy in Hungarian. His artistic courage is staggering. The way he disappears into roles that terrify other actors, the vulnerability, the monstrosity, the complete absence of vanity. He speaks about a challenging scene he's preparing for, and the intellectual architecture behind his approach is breathtaking. Each choice layered with meaning, each gesture carrying the weight of months of research. He listens with the same intensity he brings to performance, complete, unwavering attention. But it's in the silences between thoughts that Ralph becomes most dangerous. He has this ability to be perfectly still, a stillness so complete it feels like the air around him stops moving. When he sets his glass down and looks directly at me, the force of his focus is almost overwhelming. He doesn't touch me once during our 2-hour conversation, and somehow that absence of contact becomes more charged than any physical connection could be. His voice, that instrument that can move from aristocratic precision to raw brutality, stays soft, making me lean closer to catch each word. When he disagrees with my assessment of a director we've both worked with, the slight tilt of his head conveys more than most actors' entire emotional repertoire. We parted with a formal handshake that, in its deliberate propriety, acknowledged everything we weren't saying or doing. Some people burn brightest in restraint, and Ralph is like a perfectly banked fire, the control itself becoming the most seductive thing about him. 7. Jack Nicholson, The Distant Fantasy. We've never worked together, not properly, passed each other at industry events, exchanged pleasantries at the Oscars, but never shared a real scene. Maybe that's why he remains the most potent what-if in my professional imagination. His artistic fearlessness is legendary. That willingness to be grotesque, ridiculous, vulnerable, terrifying, often in the same scene. The technical precision underneath the seeming chaos. I've studied his performances the way painters study masters, for the brushstrokes no one else would dare. The way he can make the most outrageous choice seem like the only possible one. His commitment to truth over comfort, always. But it's the gravitational pull he exerts without apparent effort that makes him impossible to dismiss. At an Academy event in the early 90s, he entered the room, and everything recalibrated around his presence. That smile, the one that suggests he knows something delicious and dangerous that you don't. His laugh, a sound that seems to come from some deep primal place most of us have forgotten how to access. The way he occupies space like he invented the concept. I watched him from across the room, the way his hand would rest briefly on someone's shoulder or arm as he spoke, the casual intimacy of it, the complete comfort in his own skin. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded room, and the slight nod he gave me carried more meaning than most screen kisses. Our paths have crossed dozens of times over decades, always with perfect professional courtesy that somehow acknowledged the road not taken. Jack doesn't perform his persona. He inhabits it with such authenticity that the line between the man and the myth becomes the most fascinating question you'll never answer. The studio falls silent as Meryl finishes. For a moment, no one speaks. Then the host clears his throat, visibly recalibrating after the intimacy of her revelations. "So there they are," Meryl says, her posture relaxing slightly. 7 roads not taken, 7 might-have-beens. Her smile is warm, a little wistful, but without regret. I've had a remarkable life, a career beyond anything I could have imagined as a young woman, a marriage that has been my foundation, children and grandchildren I adore. She smooths an invisible wrinkle from her slacks, eyes twinkling with that familiar intelligence. But I think we all carry these alternative narratives, these ghost stories of what might have happened if we'd turned left instead of right at certain crossroads. It doesn't diminish what we chose. It just acknowledges the richness of possibility. The host starts to ask another question, but Meryl's laugh cuts him off. That full-bodied, head-thrown-back laugh that has punctuated her interviews for decades. And before you ask, yes, I behaved myself, mostly. She winks at the camera, suddenly conspiratorial. But there's something delicious about admitting that even Meryl Streep isn't always thinking about the next Oscar when the right pair of eyes is looking back at her across a crowded room.